Monopoly capitalism. So a monopoly is a good for everyone on the side, but what about everyone on the outside? Do outsize profit come at the expense of the rest of society? Actually, yes. Profit come out of customers' wallet and monopolies deserve their bad reputation, but only in a world where nothing changes. In a static world, a monopolist is just a rent collector. If you corner the market for something, you can jack up the price. Other will have no choice but to buy from you. Think of the famous board game that are shuffle around from player to player, but the board never changes. There's no way to win by inventing a better kind of real estate development. The relative values of the properties are fixed for all time, so all you can do is try to buy them up. But the world we live in is dynamic. It's possible to invent new and better things. Creative monopolists give customer more choices by adding entirely new categories of abundance to the world. Creative monopolies aren't just good for the rest of society; they are powerful engines for making it better. Even the government knows this. That's why one of its department works hard to create monopolies by granting patents to new inventions, even though another part hunts them down by pro- pro- prosecuting antitrust cases. It's possible to question whether anyone should really be awarded a legally enforceable monopoly simply for having been the first to think of something like a mobile software design. But it is clear that something like Apple's monopoly profit from designing, producing, and marketing the iPhone were the reward for creating greater abundance, not artificial scarcity. Customers were happy to finally have the choice of paying high prices to get a smartphone that actually works. The dynamism of new monopolies itself explain why old monopolies don't struggle innovation with Apple's iOS at the forefront. The rate of mobile computing has dramatically reduced Microsoft decades long operating system dominance before the IBM's hardware monopoly of the 60s and 70s was overtaken by Microsoft software monopoly. AT&T had a monopoly on telephone services for most of the 20th century, but now anyone can get a cheap cell phone plan from any number of the provider. If the tendency of monopoly business were to hold back progress, they would be dangerous and we be right to oppose them. But the history of progress is a history of better monopoly business replacing incumbent incumbent. Monopolies drive progress because the promise of year or even decades of monopoly profits provides a powerful incentive or to innovate. Then monopolists can keep innovating because profits enable them to make the long-term plans and to finance the ambitious research project that firms locked in competition can't dream of. So why are economics obsessed with competition as an ideal state? It's a relic of history. Ec- Economists copied their mathematics from the work of 19th century phys- physicists. They see individuals and business as interchangeable atoms, not as unique creators. Their theories describe an equilibrium state of perfect competition because that's what easy to model, not because it represents the best of business, but it's worth recalling that the long run equilibrium predicted by 19th century's physics was a state in which all energy is evenly distributed and everything comes to rest, also known as the heat that of the universe. Whatever your views on thermodynamics, it's a powerful metaphor in business, and equilibrium means stasis, and stasis means that if you if your industry is in a competitive equilibrium, the debt of your business won't matter to the world. Some other undifferentiated competitor will always be ready to take your place. Perfect equilibrium may describe the void that is most of the universe. It may even characterize many business, but every new creation take place far from equilibrium in the real world outside economics theory. Every business is successful exactly to the extent that it does something others cannot. Monopoly is therefore not a pathology or an exception. Monopoly is the condition of every successful business. Tolstoy opens Anna Karenina by observing all happy families are like each happy family is unhappy in its own way. Business is the opposite. All happy companies are different. Each one earns a monopoly by solving a unique problem. All failed companies are the same. They fail to escape competition. The ideology of competition. Creative monopoly means new products that benefits everybody and sustainable profit for the creator. Competition means no profit for anybody, no meaningful differentiation and a struggle for survival. So why do people believe that competition is healthy? The answer is that competition is not just an economic concept or a simple inconvenience that individual and companies must deal with in the marketplace. More than anything else, competition is ideology, the ideology that pervades our society and distort our thinking. We preach competition, internalize its necessity and enact its commandment, and as a result we trap ourselves within it. Even though the more we compete, the less we gain. That is simple true, but we are all being trained to ignore it. Our education system both devise and reflect our obsession with competition. Grades themselves allow precise measurement of each student competitiveness. Pupil with the highest marks receive status and credentials. We teach every young person the same subject in mostly the same ways, irrespective of individual talents and preference. Students who don't learn best by sitting still at a desk are made to feel somehow inferior, while children who excel or conventional majors like tests and assignment end up defining their identities in terms of this rarely contrived academic parallel reality. And it gets worse as students ascend to higher levels of the tournament. Elite students claim confidently until they reach a level of competition sufficiently intense to beat their dreams out of them. Higher education is a place where people who had big plans in high schools get stuck in fears rivalries with equally smart peers over conventional careers like management, consulting, and investment banking for the privilege of being thrown into confor- conformist student, or their families pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in skyrocketing tuition that continues to outpace inflation. Why are we doing this into ourselves? I wish I had asked myself when I was younger. My path was so tracked that in my 8th grade yearbook, one of my friends predicted accurately that 4 years later I would enter Stanford as a sophomore. And after a conventionally successful undergraduate career, I enroll at Stanford Law School, where I compete even harder for the standard badges of success. The highest prize in the law student world is unambiguous. Out of 10 of thousands of graduates each year, only a few dozen get a Supreme Court clerkship. After clerking on a federal appeal court For a year, I was invited to interview for clerkship with Justice Kennedy and Scalia. My meeting with the justice went well. I was so close to winning this last competition. If only I got the clerkship, I thought I would be set for life, but I didn't at the time. I was devastated. In 2004, after I had built and sold people, I ran into an old friend from law school who had helped me prepare my failed clerkship application. We hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. His first question wasn't, "How are you doing?" or "Can you believe it been so long?" Instead, he grinned and asked, "So, Peters, aren't you glad you didn't get that clerkship?" With the benefits of hindsight, we both knew that winning that ultimate competition would have changed my life for the worse. Had I actually cracked on the Supreme Court, I probably would have spent my entire career taking depositions or drafting other people deals instead of creating anything new. It's hard to say how much would be different, but the opportunity costs were enormous. All Rhodes scholars had a great future in their past. War and Peace. Professors downplayed the cutthroat culture of academia, but managers never try of comparing business to war. MBA students carry around copies of Clausewitz and Sun Tzu war metaphors invade our everyday business language. We use headhunters to build up a sales force that will enable us to take a captive market and make a killing, but really it's competition, not business, that is like war. Allegedly necessary, supposedly valiant, but ultimately destructive. Why do people compete with each other? Marx and Shakespeare provide two models for understanding almost every kind of conflict. According to Marx, people fight because they are different. The proletariat, proletariat fights the bourgeoisie because they have completely different ideas and goals generated of Marx by their very different material circumstance. The greater the difference, the greater the conflict. To Shakespeare, the contrasts all combatants look more or less alike. It's not all the clear why they should be fighting since they have nothing to fight about. Consider the opening line from Romeo and Juliet, two household both alike in dignity. The two houses are like, yet they hate each other. They grow even more similar as the feud escalates. Eventually, they lose sight of what they started fighting in the first place. In the world of business, at least Shakespeare proves the superior guide inside a firm. People become obsessed with their competition for career advancement, then the firm themselves become obsessed with their competitors. In the marketplace, amid all the human drama, people lose sight of what matters and focus on their rival instead. Let's test the Shakespeare and model in the real world. Imagine a production called Gates and Schemidt based on Romeo and Juliet. Montague is Microsoft, Capsulate is Google, Montague is Microsoft, Capulet is Google. Two great families run by alpha nerds, sure to clash on account of their sameness. As with all good tragedy, the conflict seems inevitable only in retrospect. In fact, it was entirely avoidable. These families came from very different places. The House of Montague built operating system and office application. The House of Capulet wrote the search engine. What was there to fight about? lots apparently as a startup, each clan had been content to leave the other alone and prosper independently, but as they grew, they began to focus on each other. Montague obsessed about Montagues. The result: Windows versus Chrome OS, Bing versus Google Search, Explorer versus Chrome, Office versus Docs, Surface versus Nexus. Just as war cost the Montagues and Capulets their children, it cost Microsoft and Google their dominance. Apple came along and overtook them all in January 2013. Apple market capitalization was 1,500 billion dollar, while Google and Microsoft combined. Apple market capitalization was 1,500 billion dollar, while Google and Microsoft combined were worth 467 billion dollar. Just 3 years before, Microsoft and Google were each more valuable than Apple. What is cost, costly business? Rivalry causes us to overemphasize all opportunities and slavishly copy what has worked in the past. Consider the recent proliferation of mobile credit and readers. In October 2010, a startup called Scar released a small white scar-shaped product that let anyone with an iPhone swipe and accept credit card. It was the first good payment processing solution for mobile handset. Imitators promptly sprang into action. A Canadian company called NetSecure launched its own card reader in a half moon shape. Intuit brought a cylindrical reader to the geometric battle in March 2012. eBay PayPal unit launched its own copycat card reader. It was shaped like a triangle, a clear job at scar. At three sides are simpler than four. One gets the sense that this Shakespeare and saga won't end until the elves run out of shapes. The hazards of imitative competition may partially explain why individuals with an Asperger like social inaptitude seems to be at an advantage in Silicon Valley today. If you are less sensitive to social cues, you are less likely to do the same things as everyone else around you. If you are interested in making things or programming computers, you will be less afraid to pursue those activities single-mindedly and thereby become incredibly good at them. Then, when you apply your skills, you are a little less likely than others to give up your own conviction. This can save you from getting caught up in crowds competing for obvious prizes. Competition can make people hallucinate opportunities where none exist. The crazy 90s version of this was the fierce battle for the online pet store market. It was pets.com versus petstore.com versus petopia.com versus what seems like dozens of other. Each company was obsessed with defeating its rival precisely because there were no substan- substantive difference to focus on. Amid all the tactical questions: who could price chewy dog toys most aggressively, who could create the best Super Bowl ads, these companies totally lost sight of the wider questions of whether the online pet supply market was the right space to be in. Winning is better than losing, but everybody loses when the war is in one worth fighting. When Pets.com folded after the dot com crash, three 300 millions dollar of investment capital disappeared with it. Other times, rivalry is just weird and distracting. Consider the Shakespearean conflict between Larry Ellison, co founder and CEO of Oracle, and Tom Siebel, a top salesman at Oracle, and Ellison Portigue before he went on to found Sable System in 1993. Ellison was livid at what he thought was Sybil betrayal. Sybil hated being in the shadow of his former boss. The two men were basically identical, hard charging Chicagoans who loved to sail and hated to lose. So their hatred ran deep. Ellison and Sable spanned the second half of the 90s trying to sabotage each other. At one point, Ellison sent truckloads of ice cream sandwiches of Siebel headquarters to try to convince Siebel employees to jump ship. The copy of the wrappers. Summer is near, Oracle is here to brighten your day and your career.